we're going to do today is we're going to learn about placing those dots. We're going to learn about manipulating those curves in between the dots by using handles, which is fun. And the reason we want to know about vectors is for a couple of reasons. One is that a vector graphic is scalable. When you've got a raster graphic, you've got these little squares on a row, and you try to make it bigger, and those squares get bigger, and you start to see them. Sometimes your computer will try to invent what might happen in between the squares to make up new squares, but you're not actually generating resolution. You're just getting fuzzy. You can take a raster graphic, you can make it smaller, but you can't make it bigger. But a vector graphic is infinitely scalable. You can make it as small, as big as you like. So this is great for things like logos. We want our logos to be vector because we don't know how big we're going to end up wanting to print it, right? Vectors are great for things like icons. Any image that you want to have a really clean, crisp look to it, something that doesn't have a gradient edge, no fuzziness. To get started, everyone should open up a brand new document. Just to show of hands, who's using Illustrator? All right, and Inkscape people. I'd like to put in a caveat. I'm an Illustrator person, not an Inkscape person, so while I've got a basic understanding of where Inkscape stuff is, JT's going to help locate any specific tool, so when I tell you to do a thing, you might, if I'm going to show you where it is on Illustrator, if you can't find it on Inkscape, he'll come around and help you.
Yeah. Raise your hand so that I'll know if you're having trouble.
Very good tool. All right. So let's start by making a shape. If you, both Inkscape and Illustrator have a tool that just lets you make a rectangle. Inkscape has a different one for rectangle, a different one for square. Illustrator, it's you hold down and you can pick a different one. It's on the same thing. Draw a shape. Now that we've got a shape, there are two different basic characteristics of any shape. There's the fill and the stroke. Now the fill is what's inside of it, and the stroke is the line on the outside. Sometimes you don't want a line on the outside. If that is the case, you can set the stroke to nothing, and it won't have one. But we're gonna play with the stroke. We like strokes for today, and I'm gonna make it a big stroke. So you can see where we are in Illustrator. I'm using this navigation bit up here. On Inkscape, you will need to open a window that is the fill and stroke navigation window. Anyone have problems with finding any of your controls?
What was the, sorry, what did you do to do the draw object to begin with?
I clicked on the rectangle tool.
Oh, okay, right, gotcha.
So once I have it activated, I can
Yeah.
make stuff. So we've got our stroke, which is adjustable. How thick do you want your stroke? Illustrator will default to points. Inkscape defaults to inches, I believe. And then your fill. So select it. Once after I've drawn it, if I've lost my selection, I need to go back and pick it up, and that'll let you continue to manipulate it. There are multiple ways to get colors. You'll see both on Illustrator and Inkscape there's a color picker. Right now I'm using swatches. Inkscape has the swatches on the bottom, and Illustrator has a swatches panel over here. But I've got a color panel too, and that exists on Inkscape as well, where you can just find it, or you can enter values. If there's a specific color value that you want. Double clicking on a swatch, creating a new swatch, double clicking on it, there's other ways to do it. I find this is the easiest. In Illustrator, you'll find that there are multiple paths to every action. Maybe not every action, but almost every action. There's different ways to do it. So if there's a specific CMYK value that I want this to be, I can set it. is my favorite food. All right, so we have a shape. We have a shape. Let's make another shape. Let's make a different kind of shape. If you made a square, let's make a circle. If you made a circle, let's make a square. Now we're going to make it a perfect shape. That time we just drew a rectangle or an ellipse. This time we're going to make it so that it's either a perfect square or a perfect circle. And you do that by holding down the Shift key. If you draw it while holding down the Shift key, it'll keep your proportions equal. Go back to the selection tool. You can manipulate your shape with these square handles from there's two different types of selection tools. We've got our object selection tool and our point selection tool. Right now we're using our object selection tool. It's going to be the darker one. Now I'm going to make this one nothing in the middle. So now I'm going to do some magic. I'm going to select both of these two objects, and I'm going to combine them into a compound path. Now what I've done is I've punched a hole in my first shape. This is one object, and it's going to respond as one object. Everything I do to it will happen to the whole thing. This can be really, really powerful in terms of building complex objects. Or having multiple layers. So I'm going to make another piece and I'm going to put it in the background. So right now this is in the front. Change color. In Illustrator, you can very easily arrange your objects. I'm going to take my selection tool, I'm going to right click, I'm going to arrange, and I'm going to send to the back. Now see how that object is behind my original object. All of these programs will automatically build everything on top of what you did before, right? And we can take a look and see where they are. In Illustrator, you can open up your layers panel and you can see that this one is underneath of this one. If you've ever used Photoshop, this will be pretty familiar to you. In Inkscape, it's a little harder to manage if you want to make sure that a thing is behind another thing, then you need to create an additional layer. Everything on one layer will be in chronological order. And so if you want to make sure that something you drew later is behind something else, you'll need to create a new layer. And that's pretty easy. There should be a plus sign. Down on Illustrator, it's a little page with the corner turned up. On Inkscape, it's a little plus sign in your layers panel. Everyone found their layers panel? I'm going to take that as a yes. All right. So what I can do in Illustrator, which is kind of fun, is I've got these little circles here. They will let me select a specific thing. It can be really great if you get lost. You can open up your layers and be like, where's the thing? I just want that thing. I don't want all the things, just want that thing. And you can take that and you can drag it. Let's go over there. You can drag your layers. That goes over there. Now I've got two different layers with two different objects. All right, are we feeling pretty comfortable with our objects and our layers? Let's move on to text. Text is super fun. We're going to start with the text tool. Looks the same in both programs. We're going to create a text box. Put in some type. I'm going to select it. I'm going to make it something different. Right, so I'm going to pull up. show here. So there's a character panel, and that's where you can change your font. Let's do something sweet. I like Luminari, and we're gonna make it big.
That's so sweet.
Okay. Our text is going to exist in a box. This box is, can change the box, right? But say we want to change the text itself, much of the manipulation of the text from within the box and the text tool is just like if you're using Word, right? It's not, it's very intuitive, it's something you're familiar with. But we can do something really rad. We can create outlines. Now the computer has just turned this text from a font that we're going to interact with as though we were using Word into an object that we can interact with like we were interacting with previous objects. So now we're going to learn about grouping. Here, I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to put my text on that layer. And I'm going to lock the object layers. Now I've made it, yes.
So there's no going back though, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Once it happens, it has happened.
you have created a shape.
You have created a shape. If you're concerned about that, especially while I was learning, what I would do a lot is I would duplicate that layer, hide it, lock it and hide it. And then when I mess up, I've got a place to go back to. So yeah, so I just locked layers. You can also hide them. Yes.
Where do you transform it from text into an object?
So in Illustrator,
Right.
type, and then it's create outlines.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, mine's grayed out because I did it. But it's right there. And in Inkscape, ooh, do you know where it is in Inkscape? All right. And we are going to learn about Bezier curves. So there's this great guy, his name is Bezier. He came up with this whole idea of points and lines and handles to manipulate them, so he got to name them. They're Bezier curves, or they're named after him. So we've got a collection of objects. Because we made this all together, it's grouped. The computer is treating it like a single unit, which we move around as a single unit. But we can ungroup right here. Ungrouping is also a thing in Inkscape, but it's a little button on the right-hand side. It's in the bottom right, the left-hand row. You might have to mouse over it in order to find that button. Now, these are each individual pieces that I can do with as I please. Now we're going to click on our direct selection tool. In Inkscape, it is a tool points on a line. Now look at all these points that are shown up. Let's work. So I can pick up a point. This one. And these handles allow me to manipulate it. And you can see it's got this hole in the middle, so we know that this is a compound path. Should play around with that a little, it's kind of fun.
Can you delete an entire, let's say you wanted to rid of the center circle?
Yeah.
Can you just click it and delete it?
So let's compound path. Now it is no longer a compound path. Now that that has happened, we can individually remove that piece. So we've created the shape by vectorizing our font, but there are other tools that will allow us to make fun little shapes. I can freehand draw. Right, so there's the line, and it came up with a 5-point round brush. I can make it smaller. We also have a pen tool. Now, pen tools are really, really, really important. This is the most important tool that exists inside of a vector program. This is the most basic thing, right? You're going to drop a point, and then I'm going to drop another point. If I click and hold, I build Bezier curves into it. I can go back to center. Now there are a couple of different ways I can play with these points. So the ones that I built a Bezier curve into as I was drawing them, they've got these two handles, right? That's really cool. That's super useful. I can play around with it. This was my first one. I didn't drag when I dropped this first point. It only has one curve. So I can go up here and I can convert it. There's two different, Inkscape has the same thing in the same location. I can convert it to Bezier curves that work together. See how when I move one, the other one follows along? Or I can convert it to two handles that don't interact with each other. Oh, I've got a curve in there. Let me break this one. Oh, I don't want to be a corner. There we go. Now I have a curve, a handle that doesn't affect the other line.
Close.
All right, we've covered a whole lot of stuff here. I'm going to go through one more thing, and then we're going to kind of backtrack and see if we've got any questions. All right, so I pulled apart my text, but I want it to line back up again, but with the things that I've done to it. So I'm going to put in a guide. I want to make sure I can see my rulers, because that's where all the guides live. They live inside the rulers. And now I have a guide. This guide lives in this layer. I can move it around. You can give my guides their own layer. That's the first one.
Yeah, if you want.
And then I can line things up. If you don't do that drag when you drop a, yeah, and now you have shape that you can fill with whatever color you want. Right? And you gotta admit that's not hard.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, and these points are editable, right? Like I want that to be over another line.
I mean, you can split that then. That's
Yeah,
how you do that.
yeah. So with my selection tool, I can delete entire lines. So now I'm going to put a stroke on it so you can see it. Now this line, that bottom line doesn't exist. So if I want to, I've got another shape. can take my selection tool and select these 2 points, right click, join. Now they're one object. And then over here, I wasn't very good with this one. You can feel them, they'll kind of like click together and join. Now this is one object. So this actually lends itself very well. Any other questions, things you'd like me to go back over a little more? Because I really blew through a whole bunch of stuff.
Are you going to show how to do the same thing with the Pathfinder tool?
With the Pathfinder tool.
Are you familiar with the Pathfinder?
I don't use it. I know it exists, but it's not a thing that I use.
Okay. Maybe I'll quickly do that, if
Okay.
you don't mind.
Don't mind at all.
Because, for the purposes of making chits and stuff, it's very useful.
Okay.
I'll just talk.
Hey, the mic's working now.
This one is working? Okay. So imagine you have a couple of shapes. Let me grab. You want to just grab and do a shape here, and then I'll do another one like this. And so I've got these 2 shapes here like this. Sorry, is everybody, oh, I guess that's out on the internet, so nobody can answer me. All right. All right, so I grab the pieces that I want to merge together, and I go over here to Window and find Pathfinder, which is there, and that brings up this tool. Now there's a bunch of different things I can do here, so I could merge them together. If I hit this button right there, now those 2 things are this part together, right? If I hit this one, it cuts a hole. It uses one to cut a hole out of the other one. And the one that's on top is the one that's going to cut through. Does that make sense? So you have this whole selection of things over here that do different things depending on, it's taking the overlapping of the 2 pieces, but depending on which one you click on, it does a different effect. Does that make sense? And so the cool thing about that is, let's say you don't know how to draw a crescent, but you needed a crescent piece in your game. You would just go like this, and then you draw another circle over that, however you want. And now I can go over here, select these 2 pieces, and use one to cut out the other, and now I've got a crescent shape. So it makes it really simple. Pathfinder makes it really simple to design kind of the shapes that you might want to have for chits and things like that. So anyway, that's
very cool. That's a very useful thing.
Like that in Inkscape?
There is something similar, but it's not nearly as powerful. Right, yeah.
All right, well, if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to start talking about die lines and cut lines. Do you have anything that anyone would like to go over before we get to die lines and cut lines?
Is there a way to, weird as it sounds, to put raster art underneath the layer?
Absolutely. So you can put stuff inside. I'm gonna.
Who asked that question? Was it Troy? Yeah. About whether there's a thing in Inkscape? I was just told that there's. Yeah, there's one. It's under path selection, apparently.
So we've got this wonderful thing, file down to place. Let's see, what do I have?
I assume that won't come out with the file you end up creating, right? Like it's not.
Let's see, that one's really big.
Yeah, like if you save it as an SVG, I assume it won't be there.
The stuff you just cut out.
Or no, I'm talking like if you put back your image.
Oh.
All right, so I went file down to place. I chose an image. You can place a Photoshop, you can put a PSD straight in there. TIFF, JPEG, whatever you like. Click once, it drops it at regular scale. it'll, if you're not careful, it'll adjust it to like something weird, right? Let's see if I can find something simpler and I can show you another interesting aspect. Lovely piece created by my eldest daughter in Photoshop. But say I want it to be vectorized so I can manipulate it like I've been manipulating some of those vector documents. We've got an object trace. This might take a second. Yeah, I've got my window. Where'd it go? There is a trace window that'll let you manipulate it because right now I've got it set to black and white. Yeah, that's. There's a window.
It's right above. It's 2 above layers. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I've got it set to black and white. So this is really useful if you've got an illustration that you need to blow up, if you've got a icon that you made in Photoshop that you need to have vectorized. It doesn't work very well for things like photographs. It comes out looking blotchy, I guess. But here looks just about the same. Let's see, did we not expand? So it'll trace it, and then when you like it, you can expand it, and then that'll give you all of the lines, the vector lines.
Under which menu is that?
Object, image trace, make, and then window image trace is what gets you the menu. Make will make it, and then you can mess around with making it. Expand will make it so that you can interact with it as a vector object.
Got it. Thank you.
What's it under on Inkscape?
Path trace has been that. Under path, there's a trace.
Got it.
So now I can take this awesome drawing and I can do things like change the color of the spaceship, right? So it can be really, really useful sometimes. Does that answer your question? Yeah, cool. All right.
Question.
Yes.
Did that title start out as zebra and eagle or something, and then the letters were just modified in ways that you were been talking about here?
So no, she hand wrote that, right? It's not from a font. She used the paintbrush in Photoshop to write it. I'm gonna tell her she should grow up to be a photographer.
So you pulled in a PNG for this, right? Or a JPEG?
Let's see, was that one saved as a?
It was a raster.
It was a raster, and it like that it will accept a PSD, it'll accept a TIFF, it'll accept a PNG, it'll accept a JPEG, any of that.
Yeah, when I convert mine, when I do the make it expand, it turns it all black and white.
Right, so that's because that mine did that first too. That's why you need to open up the image trace window and change it from the mode from black and white to color. It'll even allow you to say how many colors you'll allow. You can say it's color, but I only want you to choose 5 colors to build it with, or I want you to use 100 colors. It is a fun tool to play around with. I've lost many an hour down that rabbit hole. All right, any other questions before we move on? Yes?
Could you show the arrange tools? Have you used those?
Arrange.
Yeah, so you can get everything to line up by the center.
Oh, right. I get what you're saying. Alignment. Yeah. So, and that's it's much like using Word, right? I can select my object, and here I can make sure it's centered vertically and horizontally and vertically, or this will it aligns to the artboard.
And I assume that, like in Photoshop, you can use it to align 2 objects too.
Objects will automatically snap to each other.
No, but I mean if you want them centered in regards to one
To each
another.
other.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Okay. I assumed it was just like
Yeah.
one in
So
Photoshop.
align to selection or align to artboard.
Okay.
It's right there. All right. All right, time to listen to Heidi rant about punch boards and cut lines. All right, so as you know, we use vectors in order to build the lines that tell us where to cut out our punch boards, our chits. Whether we're using a die cut, which is what you might do in mass production, or a laser cut, which is what we're going to do for prototyping in small runs. These two things have slightly different requirements when we set up these files, but there are things that hold true for everything. And one thing that holds true is that you print on one machine and you cut on a different machine. So you're moving your piece from one machinery to another piece of machinery. And those two machines should be very well aligned to each other, but they aren't always. And so we have to understand drift. Drift is the concept that there is something that is not exactly perfect about the alignment of these two machines. So where your image is and where you say cut here and where it actually gets cut can be different. And that difference is dependent upon the machines that you're using. So I believe the Game Crafter with their laser cutting has an incredibly small amount of drift. It's really quite stunning. But most anywhere else will consider a 1 millimeter drift to be acceptable. So even if you're prototyping through the Game Crafter where drift is not really that big of a problem, if you think there's a possibility that you will ever mass produce your game, you need to plan ahead and plan for drift. So what we do in order to plan for drift is have things called bleed and margins. Bleed is where we provide extra around all of the edges, because if we say, here's my shape and I'm going to cut exactly where that shape is and it's off a little bit, you're going to get that blank paper on one or two sides when the two didn't line up exactly. So most everywhere asks for 1/8 of an inch, 3 millimeters, even the Game Crafter asks for bleed. That's what bleed is. Bleed is that extra stuff that's going to get cut off that we put there to make sure that when drift happens, you don't have these unprinted areas. And the other one is margin. Margin is what we do on the inside of the cut line to make sure that when drift happens, the important stuff inside doesn't get cut off. So I always recommend that people, when they're making their design, just assume while you're designing that there's going to be 1 millimeter of difference between where you say to cut and where it actually cuts. It won't be that big, right? Like in practicality, the likelihood that you'll have a whole millimeter, which is really small, difference is low. But assume that that will happen and that will help your design. So if you're off by a millimeter and so there's, on any of your Game Crafter templates, you've seen margin lines. They say don't print outside of this area. Well, what if you jam all your stuff right up to that margin line? And then there's a little bit of drift. Say we get that 1 millimeter drift. Off center, because the eye will notice the percentages. So if you give yourself more margin than the minimums required, your art is never going to appear to be off center, even if it really is. Okay, that was my soapbox right there. That's something I really care about. I'll get down now. All right, so when we are dealing with die lines, so I work for Panda and I build a lot of die lines for Panda, and I'm going to show you one that I built. Nope, that's not there. All right, we're going to start with this one. I was hoping to show you a different one. So this is for a foil pack, not for a punch board, but die lines remain the same for multiple printing objects, even for cards, right? We have these yellow lines are where we're going to either cut around the outside or where we're going to fold. This is where the hang tab gets cut out. Here is we want that's our bleed. We want it to go all the way to the bleed. The dotted lines, that's our margin. So I'm just going to steal some stuff from it. All right, so I'm going to take, this one's going to be my bleed line. I'm going to make it blue. Oops, not that blue. So I'm going to make a punch board. The whole board is going to be, let's do 100 millimeter square. Not, are we linked? Oh, we're linked. Now I'm going to put an extra 3 millimeters of bleed on both sides, so that's +6. Why? And this one needs to be smaller. And I want them to line up. So we're going to center everybody on the board. Now, say this is my available area, and I'm going to make some circle tokens. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking on this line to pick up its characteristics. right? So now that I've selected that line, my computer's like, oh, we're going to do more like that. And so when I go to my circle selection tool and hold down the shift to make it even, it's going to carry the characteristics that I just had. So I'm going to have some circles that are, we're going to make these 25 millimeters. Now, if it's a 25 millimeter circles that I want punched out, and I've got 3 millimeters of margin on each side, these are going to be 19 millimeter margin. And I'm going to pick up the characteristics of this line, make a third circle, and 25 millimeter circles with 3 millimeters of margin on each side. This gives us a 31 millimeter bleed. That time I linked the characteristics so I didn't have to do it twice. And I'm going to select these 3 objects, not 4. Okay, I held shift and then I selected the thing I didn't want. And now I'm going to group these. Now this is one thing, right? Whenever I select any part of it, I select all of it. Let's see, I've got the bleed goes out to 31 millimeters. I want to get a couple of these in this square. So I'm going to object transform, move. I'm going to move horizontally 31 millimeters, vertically 0 millimeters, and I'm going to copy it. Now I've got 2 of them. I'm going to put them together. Object, transform, move. And now I'm not going to go horizontal. I'm going to go vertical. I'm going to copy it. Command G groups them together. And once they're grouped together, we can center them as a group. So now this will allow us to create a die cut that will punch out 4 chits. And it has all of our information so that we can use this as a template to put on top of art. Like I can make this into I've got a layer that's this. Now I can create a new layer and put my art inside of it. I'll make sure it goes through all those bleeds. And now, oops. Copy and paste it just like in Word. Oops. All right, but first we're going to go to the Game Crafter and we're going to make our prototype. So we need to know how to cut it out with a laser. Frickin' laser beams. How cool is that? So with that, we don't, they will have a template that will have the size of the board and this margin line. But this inside stuff, we got to make that ourselves, all by ourselves. So let's take, I'm going to Command Shift G to ungroup, otherwise it's in here. Did it twice because I've grouped a couple of times. I'm going to take just the cutting pieces. and I'm going to move them to their now. We need to put some nicks in here because the laser, if we have the laser cut, like so when we send a file, vector file off to a place that's going to create our die cuts for mass production, they're going to put the nicks in themselves for those. But we're working with the game crafter. We're going to do it ourselves. We're going to put in some nicks so that when the laser goes in and cuts these apart, it doesn't fall off and get lost in the machinery. I want it to all stay together. So we're going to get our rectangle tool. That's a bit much. So let's make this 0.01 inches high. We're not linked. Not linked. This is what happens when they are linked and you don't want them to be linked. I'll come and get you. Don't worry. It's okay. All right, we're going to try it again. All right. We've got the thing that's going to make the nick. We've got the objects they're going to nick in. Object path. Divide objects below. Oh no, I've got too many things.
You can use the Pathfinder tool to do it as well.
Sweet. This one. But we've probably still got too much stuff. Oh no, we don't. Look at it. What? Yeah, I still got to get rid of these guys because we don't want to cut our circle in half.
Also, you.
I lost my circle, I know. All right, so there's some nicks. Let's make them go both ways.
Is there a particular width those nicks should be?
Yes, the game craft requests that it be 1/100th of an inch, 0.01 inches.
10 thousandths of an inch.
10 thousandths.
Okay.
It's super tiny. Not linked with 0.01 inch. And then we're going to use this magical path. Oh, well, it won't. It'll get rid of that one, won't it? Dang it. Your Pathfinder tool is not as cool as I thought it was.
Not as intuitive.
What?
Yeah, divide can't divide more than one.
Why? It should. It should love me. It should do as I say. It should read my mind.
Someone online asked, is there a best width for the nicks? Can you just talk about that?
10 thousandths of an inch or 3 pixels.
10 thousandth of an inch or 3 pixels
Yeah,
wide.
So figuring out like where to put them is kind of up to you, at least the game crafter side of things, right? Like, if I had a bizarre shape, it'd be up to me to make sure that I put enough of them in.
That is
to
correct.
fall out.
That's
We're
absolutely.
going to show a much easier way to do nicking, by the way, using Component Studio later today.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got my nicks placed in this one, but I've still got my bleeds and margins from before, which help me know where I can put my stuff. But when we send this file off to the Game Crafter to cut our stuff up, we're going to save this as a new document, and we're going to delete everything that isn't these red lines. All right, so we're going to get rid of all of that. So all that's left are where the laser cuts. Now, we also want to optimize the cutting. So Game Crafter is going to charge you by how much that laser moves, right? So if the laser is just jumping all over the page, it's going to cost you a lot more than necessary. So let's learn now how to save you a little cash. I'm going to start by duplicating this a few times. All right, so we've got 3 circles. We're going to try to make sure that these get cut in the right direction, in the right order. First, I'm going to select them all, and we're going to put arrows at the end of the line. All of these vector programs, lines have direction. They're not just 2 points and the curve in between them. They're also, one of those points is the start point, and one of those points is the end point for your line, right? The equation that describes the line starts in one place, ends in another place, okay? So we're going to make sure that we put our arrows at the end. Where? Got my stroke window. And I've got arrowheads. I'm going to put an arrow at the end. So we can see that each of these lines goes to another line, right? If we had arrows pointing at each other, that's bad. We want to make sure that all of the arrows flow. So in Illustrator, we can do this organization within this one layer because it'll break it down by each individual piece. However, in Inkscape, you're going to want to put each line on its very own layer and then do what I'm about to do here. So I'm going to select one line, and it shows me here. This is kind of hard to see. Let's see if I can. I'm going to change this color to something a little easier to spot. No, I don't think violet was a great color to go with our magenta. Let's try this again. Gold, maybe. Cyan, that might work. All right, so there we go. We can see that a little better. We can see it's referring to this one. So this is, let's start here. This is our, nope, still yellow. Here we go. Okay, so this is where the laser is going to start. Laser's going to come in. It's going to start here at the top, and it's going to go to here. We want to make sure that this is the next one. Score. All right, now it's going to come up here. Yeah, we got that. Now let's, instead of going to finish this circle, let's hop up to here and do this circle, and then hop down to here, do this circle, and then hop over here, because we want to get nice flow. We're going to go, that's our plan. So it went from here to here, wait, there to there. So we don't want this one there. We're going to move this one down to here. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, Oh, no, we don't want that one to be 3. Oh, that's why they're all grouped out. Got 1, 2. Nope, we don't want that one. We want this one. To be in our 3rd spot. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Cool. And then we're going 4, 5. Oh, what's that? That's a lonely dot. We don't want that, right? So if that had been in our laser file, the laser would have been zoop, gone over there and been like boop, and then moved back. And that would have cost you like money. So we're tracking all this stuff down. All right, that's not where we wanted to go next. So from here, we want to go here, which is still group. So we're going to ungroup that. That one we want. Next. From here to there. Ta-da! Nope, not to there. We want to go there. Okay. From here to there, to there. Oh, no. There. All right, but we didn't want to go from here to here. We want to go from here to here. We want this one. So we're going to move it up. Too far. This one's still a group. Gonna ungroup it. We've got there. Nope, I want that one. From there to there to there, and we're done. Wait, what's this? Gone. All right, now we have, yes?
How do you decide where to start the first one?
You know, the edge is a really great place. I was totally arbitrary because I wanted to juggle things because I wanted you to see how it got juggled. But the edge.
So left, top, bottom, right.
I heard the laser sorts at 0, 0, so the closest
Top
to
left
that.
for the king card.
Okay, top left. There you go.
Okay, so therefore you want to start.
You'd probably want to start.
Upper left arc.
Yep.
So for submitting it though to like the Incrafter in this situation, let's say you have rastered art, but you also need the SVG for the cut, right? So that 2-file, I haven't looked at the
Yeah, so the, no matter what type of art you have, it is 2 files. The cut file is its own file. So before we can save this as an SVG, we have to take those arrows back out. We've cleaned it up. We've made sure the directions are correct. We've put everything in order. We've deleted all of the layers that aren't the cut lines. And now we're ready to save this as an SVG. All right, any questions?
So with this then too, let's say I have a rastered image that needs to go underneath it, how would you align it? Do you align it to like the artboard or, right, I want to make sure like circles are going to be.
They're going to be where you want them to be, right? So you'll get a template that will be the artboard, right? You'll download the template off of the Game Crafter, and you will create a layer underneath of this layer. That'll be the art. So you'll drop that in, and then draw whatever shape you need to cut out. Look, it's Mr. Potato Head.
So you had to cut, like let's just say that's the cut lines.
Mm-hmm.
I had a pane file that I need to put underneath it.
Right. So
The line at the top left then of the artboard.
you could put it wherever you want in the artboard, and then your cut lines just have to match, right? So if you have an image, let's see.
So yeah, when you download the template from the Game Crafter, it will be the right size for the punch out. And so that's going to be the size. So your art is going to have to be the same size. So they're going to align perfectly.
So like if, let's just say the template is 3 inches by 3 inches, I would need to create like a pane file that's 3 inches by 300.
At 300 dpi.
Yeah. And then just both of those uploaded in the process, I would make sure that when they're on top of each other, it's all lined up.
Yeah, when you proof the punch outs, it will show you the cut
Oh,
over
okay. Cool.
Yeah.
your image.
So if I wanted to cut out the skull was the thing that got cut out. You just want to make sure you give it plenty of space. I recommend 3 millimeters. One thing that you can do if you're starting with the art and then building your die lines from it. So I'm going to cut out this skull, right? I'm going to take my pencil tool. And I'm just going to trace this. Pen tool, there's also adding and subtracting. I was going to show you this earlier. You can also just like get rid of stuff you don't want. And you can add wherever you need an extra one. All right, now this is my art. I want to make sure it's got enough margin, right? So I'm going to copy it. Oops. And I'm going to make it bigger. Now maybe that's my cut line. All right, so I have come to the end of the basic stuff that I wanted to cover. We still have 45 minutes to hang out. So if you've got some questions about any of the stuff I've covered or anything to do with Illustrator at all, we can figure it out together. Yeah, yeah. So
Like sometimes when I just export it as like a PNG.
especially when building a PDF, it's nice to have, if you're building a PDF off of Illustrator, it's nice to have multiple artboards because that makes multiple pages, right? So there's just a tool. Doop. Or you can it's like the duplicate new additional Adobe sign for everything. And they're labeled, excuse me, they're labeled so you know if you create a PDF which order they go in. They don't have to all be the same. You can make them whatever you want. If you use this button, it'll make another one that's exactly the same. Otherwise, you can just draw a new one. Yes.
This might be a really dumb question, but what is the best way of exporting these images to just a basic, or these vectors, this work, to a basic image that you'd upload to the game?
So the Game Crafter asks for their image files, they want PNGs. Export as, and this will, if you use artboards here, it'll create multiple PNGs. For one for each artboard that you have, which can be super convenient.
Occasionally, in just playing around and I don't know it very well, I've had issues with being a couple pixels or something off.
Yes, I have come across that with the Game Crafter as well. And because we're working with this automated system, which is super awesome in so many ways, it also means it's very rigid in other ways. And because Illustrator is a vector program, it's not judging things by pixels. So it may convert your inches or millimeters into something that is 1 pixel off from what the Game Crafter wants. Do you have a good answer for this, JT? What's the, if I'm exporting a PNG from Illustrator, and it creates a file that I try to upload to the Game Crafter, and the Game Crafter machine says you are 1 pixel off. What's the best way to adjust that file?
Well, you can do 2 different things. You can either use Illustrator and export via export to web, yeah, and that'll go pixel perfect. Or just the file that comes out, use some other program, a raster editing program, to resize it 1 pixel.
And that's what I've done. I've opened it up in Photoshop and shrunk it by 2 pixels. Yeah.
Well, the problem is that Illustrator is a vector program. It's not working off of pixels, so it rounds things, and so that sometimes there's a rounding error, and you'll get 1 pixel off.
So, yeah. So that's not a stupid question at all. That's very valuable.
So
Yeah?
vector export should be
SVG?
SVG?
Mm-hmm, that's,
No, there's actually a fix for that bug.
Oh.
Yeah, the 1 pixel off is actually a fix. It's a known bug in Illustrator,
oh yeah?
and it has to do with the way the artboard is assigned. And it took me like, I think it took me like a half hour of searching on Google to find the fix, but there's actually a whole forum with people like, I get this all the time, how do I fix it? And it's just like, it's a couple settings in the way, you know how you're creating new artboards?
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a way of you editing your current artboard size, and it keeps it from rounding.
Huh.
Nice.
Awesome.
Can you explain how to do it?
I do not remember. Like, there's lots of I'm doing it. Yeah, I'll have to see if I can find it and like post it up somewhere. For sure. But yeah, apparently it's a known bug. I didn't know that until like I'm like, oh, it's just rounding, but no, apparently it's an artboard bug.
Right on. Yeah, the SVG is in Save As.
My question is just on layering and how you can move around layers.
Mm-hmm.
You were flashing around pretty quick, but your comment was when you're doing the arrows that you have to layer every single arrow.
So you're in Inkscape?
So I'm in Inkscape.
Mm-hmm.
How do I move things around in layers?
Does Inkscape drag and drop?
Yes.
Yeah. Just drag them around. Click and hold and move it.
You can see the list of layers, and you can just drag and drop them up and down.
And to move an object, To move an object from one layer to another in Illustrator is what you've been watching me do, and all you have to do is drag the selection in the layer panel, which is super easy. But in Inkscape, you need to cut and paste. To get it from one, you cut it from one layer, select the new layer that you want it to be on, and then paste it there.
You can also right-click and move to layer.
Nice. Right-click and move to layer. That's way easier.
Select each one and sequence you want and move it to a higher layer as you go. That's quicker than trying to cut and paste stuff.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for your time.